in the heart of a dense forest, where the sunlight barely kissed the forest floor, a young bobcat cub wandered through the underbrush. The trees, towering and ancient, stretched high above, their thick trunks and gnarled roots creating a labyrinth of shadows. The air was cool and smelled of earth, moss, and the faint scent of pine. A soft breeze whispered through the leaves, making the forest feel alive, as though it were quietly watching the cub. The little bobcat was barely a few weeks old. Its coat, a soft mix of brown and gray, with dark spots that helped it blend seamlessly with its surroundings. It was still learning about the world, exploring cautiously, testing its instincts in the safe confines of the forest. It had learned the basics of survival, how to crouch low, how to stalk, and how to use its sharp claws to hold on to the rocks and trees. Its large golden eyes gleamed with curiosity, darting from one thing to the next, taking in every small detail with wonder. On this particular morning, the cub's tiny paws left prints in the damp earth as it explored its territory. Its playful nature led it to chase after a fluttering butterfly that danced in the air, weaving between the trees and over the ferns. The cub's movements were awkward, yet full of excitement as it pounced at the butterfly, missing by mere inches every time. The forest seemed peaceful, untouched, and for a moment the cub felt completely safe. But the serenity of the moment didn't last long. High above, in the branches of the trees, a pair of eyes watched the cub with cold calculation. The crows had been circling the area for hours. Their black feathers blended with the dark shadows of the forest, and their sharp, beady eyes glistened with something more than mere observation. They weren't just passing through. They were watching, waiting. At first, the cub didn't notice the crows. The young bobcat was too busy with its playful antics to see the growing number of dark shapes high above. The crows' wings flapped silently, their movements precise, as they positioned themselves, settling onto nearby branches with a watchful gaze. The cub continued to play, oblivious to the danger that was slowly closing in. The forest was full of life, yet there was something unsettling in the air. The birds that usually filled the forest with their cheerful songs were silent now. The wind itself seemed to pause, holding its breath, as the crows began to gather in greater numbers. Their caws were distant at first, faint and eerie, but soon they grew louder, filling the space with their ominous rhythm. The cub's ears twitched, and it paused for a moment, looking around, but it couldn't understand what was wrong. Its playful spirit wasn't dampened yet, and it padded on, pushing through the tall grasses. But the more it moved, the more the crows appeared. One by one, they landed on branches, their dark forms now visible in the gloom of the forest. Their eyes never left the cub. The crows weren't making a sound now, but the tension in the air was palpable. The cub's instincts began to stir, warning it of something unfamiliar. Its fur bristled as it slowed its movements, sensing the change in the atmosphere. It felt the weight of being watched, a discomfort that it hadn't known before. The crows, seemingly endless in their numbers, were surrounding the little bobcat. Their wings stirred the air, and the forest grew still. Something was happening, but the cub couldn't yet understand. It was still too young to grasp the danger lurking just beyond the safety of its playful world. The crows, silent and dark, moved like shadows across the sky, and the cub, though unsure, could feel the tension thickening in the air, as if something was about to break. The crows continued to gather above the little bobcat, their numbers growing steadily. It was as though the forest had transformed from a peaceful sanctuary to a place filled with silent watchers. Each crow perched on the branches of the trees, their beaks sharp and eyes unwavering, keeping the cub in their sights. As they settled, they began to make their presence felt in the air, their wings rustling as they shifted position. The cub, still unaware of the growing danger, continued to play, though its movements had slowed. The unease in the air had not gone unnoticed by its sharp senses. The once serene sounds of the forest had faded into the background, replaced by a strange, heavy silence. The occasional rustle of leaves in the wind, the soft crackle of twigs beneath the cub's paws, and the distant chirp of an unseen animal had all quieted. Only the occasional caw of a crow broke the stillness, a harsh and jarring sound that echoed through the trees. The cub's golden eyes flicked nervously between the branches above, trying to locate the source of the noise, but the crows blended so seamlessly with the dark canopy that they remained invisible to its gaze. There was something different now in the way the cub moved. The playful energy that had once filled its tiny body was being replaced by caution. It paused for a moment, its fur standing on end as it scanned the surroundings. The soft breeze had stopped, and the once vibrant leaves that danced above the cub's head now hung still, as if frozen in time. The forest felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that made every breath feel labored. It was as though the very air itself had thickened, pressing in on the cub from all sides. The crows, meanwhile, grew bolder. No longer content to simply watch, they began to hop from branch to branch, their sharp beaks clicking with impatience. Their movements became more deliberate, and their dark eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. The cub instinctively crouched low, its muscles tensing, as if preparing to flee. But it was trapped in the quiet, oppressive stillness of the forest, with no clear escape. The more it moved, the more the crows seemed to close in, their wings brushing the leaves as they shifted closer to the ground. The cub could feel the change in the forest's atmosphere. It was no longer the gentle, welcoming place it had been just moments ago. The forest had become a trap, and it was the prey. Every step it took now felt heavy, as though the ground beneath its paws was pulling it deeper into danger. The crows weren't just watching anymore. They were surrounding it, cutting off any possibility of escape. They cawed again, their voices echoing through the forest, a harsh chorus that seemed to vibrate through the cub's tiny bones. The cub darted toward the shadows of a nearby rock pile, hoping to find refuge between the jagged stones. Its heart raced, and its breathing became shallow as it squeezed its small body into the crevices of the rocks, hoping to disappear into the safety of the earth. The shadows wrapped around it like a comforting embrace, but the cub's sense of safety was fleeting. The crows had followed, their eyes still locked on the cub as they circled overhead. The cub's mind raced as it huddled between the rocks, trembling. It had been so certain that it was alone, that the forest was a place of refuge, but now it seemed to be closing in on it, the very air thick with unseen threats. The crows, with their sharp beaks and cold eyes, were not just silent observers. They were predators, waiting for the right moment. The little bobcat was no longer in control. It could feel it, deep in its bones, the inevitable change in the rhythm of its world. Something terrible was drawing closer. But what it was, the cub couldn't yet know. The tension in the air seemed to stretch endlessly, growing thicker with every passing moment. The crows, once silent and distant, were now actively circling above the little bobcat. Their presence was suffocating, their dark figures cutting through the sunlight as they soared in tight, deliberate formations. The cub, huddled between the rocks, could feel their eyes on it. Even as it crouched low, trying to make itself as small and hidden as possible, the sensation of being surrounded grew ever more intense. The forest was eerily still, the only sound now being the occasional rustle of the crow's wings or the soft movement of leaves in the wind. But the wind, too, seemed to have slowed, as though it, too, was holding its breath. The cub's tiny heart thudded in its chest, each beat a loud reminder of the danger creeping closer with every second. Despite its instincts telling it to flee, to run deeper into the forest where it might be safer, the cub was frozen, caught between the safety of the rock crevice and the overwhelming sense that the world had shifted around it. And then, as if on cue, the crows dove. The sudden flurry of wings and sharp caws was deafening. It was as if the forest had erupted into chaos. The cub's golden eyes widened in shock as it scrambled to move, its paws slipping against the rocks, its claws scraping uselessly against the rough surfaces. The crows were quick, far quicker than the cub had anticipated, and they came down in a coordinated strike. Their black feathers blended with the shadows, their sharp beaks aimed at the cub's soft, vulnerable fur. The sharp claws of the birds scraped at the ground, the air filled with a menacing screech. The cub darted out from the crevice, its limbs moving in a blur as it attempted to escape the sudden onslaught. It raced through the underbrush, its small body moving with a desperation it had never felt before. But no matter how fast it ran, the crows were faster. They seemed to be everywhere, above it, beside it, even beneath it, their wings slicing through the air with a terrifying precision. Every time the cub tried to veer off course, they swooped in, forcing it to keep running in a single direction, pushing it deeper into the dense part of the forest, where the trees were tighter and the shadows darker. The cub's small, breathless body ached as it raced on. Its fur was being tugged at, the sharp pecks of the crows leaving tiny marks on its skin. It was panicked, its mind flooded with fear and confusion. Why were they attacking? What had it done wrong? The cub's thoughts raced as fast as its paws, but there was no time to ponder the answers. Its only focus was survival. Every muscle in its body screamed for it to keep moving, to escape the birds that now swarmed around it, their caws growing louder, more insistent. Then, as the cub turned a corner, something else caught its attention. A shift in the ground beneath its feet, a rumbling sensation that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The cub hesitated for only a moment, unsure of what it had just felt, but the ground trembled again, more violently this time. and a terrifying growl echoed from the depths of the forest. The crows, who had been relentlessly pursuing the cub, froze mid-flight, their caws dying down to a low, ominous murmur. The cub felt its blood run cold as the shadows around it seemed to stretch, as if the very trees were pulling away in fear. A powerful figure emerged from the darkness of the trees, its massive paws thundering against the earth. The cub froze in place, its heart nearly stopping. The crows, now far less interested in their prey, scattered in all directions, their sharp caws growing distant as they fled. The ground continued to shake, the thumping sound drawing closer. The cub's golden eyes were wide with terror, and for the first time since it had been born, it understood what true danger meant. The forest, once a home filled with safety, had become a battleground. The creature approaching was not just any predator, it was a wolf. A massive, towering wolf, its fur dark and matted, its eyes gleaming with hunger. It had emerged from the depths of the forest, its powerful legs propelling it toward the cub with a predator's grace. The bobcat cub's breath hitched in its throat. It tried to back away, but the wolf's eyes locked onto its every movement, its predatory instincts fully awakened. The crows had given way to a far more terrifying threat, and the cub's only thought was escape. Except it was trapped. The wolf's growl sent a chill down its spine, its fur standing on end as it realized that, for all its speed and agility, it was no match for such a fearsome predator. The cub's heart pounded in its chest as it tried to back away from the terrifying sight before it. The wolf, with its massive form and glowing eyes, was closing in, its growl vibrating the ground beneath the cub's tiny paws. The air around them was thick with tension, a suffocating silence that pressed in on the young bobcat. It knew instinctively that it was no longer a playful creature in a peaceful forest. It was prey, and the wolf was a predator, a force of nature that would stop at nothing to catch its meal. The cub's legs trembled, its small body frozen in fear. It tried to move, but its muscles wouldn't respond. Every instinct it had ever learned told it to run, to escape. But the ground beneath it felt like quicksand, and the air was thick with the scent of danger. The wolf's eyes never left the cub, its gaze filled with cold calculation, as if it had already decided its prey's fate. The cub could feel the immense power of the wolf's presence, the undeniable certainty of its strength. It was no match for such an enemy. For a fleeting moment, the cub considered hiding. Perhaps it could find a crevice in the rocks or slip into the thick underbrush, but it was too late. The wolf was already upon it. With a final menacing growl, the wolf leaped forward, its jaws opening wide, the sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. The cub's small body jerked back in a panic, but the wolf was faster, its claws digging into the earth as it sprang. The cub had no time to think, only to react, and instinct took over. It darted to the side, trying to evade the wolf's jaws, but the wolf's speed was unmatched. Just as the wolf's mouth was about to close around the cub's small body, something incredible happened. From above, a shadow swept down with startling speed. The crows, who had scattered only moments ago, suddenly reappeared in force, swooping down with a ferocity the cub had never witnessed. Their wings beat the air with a thunderous sound, and their caws echoed through the forest like a battle cry. They dove toward the wolf, sharp beaks and claws aimed at its eyes and ears, distracting it in a blur of dark feathers. The wolf snarled in surprise and pain as the crows attacked, their beaks piercing its thick fur. For a brief moment, the cub could hardly believe its eyes. The birds were fighting the wolf, swarming around its head, pecking and clawing with alarming precision. The wolf howled, its powerful body flailing as it tried to fend off the relentless assault. The crows, though small in comparison, worked together like a well-coordinated army, their sharp beaks delivering quick strikes, forcing the wolf to retreat. For a heartbeat, time seemed to slow. The cub, dazed and confused by the sudden turn of events, watched as the wolf, now blinded by the crow's attack, staggered back. Its growls became more desperate, its paws clawing at the ground as it tried to shake off the birds. The crows kept coming, relentless and fearless, their movements swift and calculated. The wolf's eyes were wide with fury and pain, but it was no match for the swarm of crows attacking from all sides. With one final, desperate snarl, the wolf turned and fled into the shadows of the forest, its powerful legs carrying it swiftly away from the attack. The crows, satisfied with their victory, ceased their assault and began to circle in the air above. Their dark forms shifted in the sky like storm clouds, their wings beating silently as they watched the wolf disappear into the depths of the forest. The cub, still trembling from the experience, remained frozen in place, unsure of what had just happened. The crows slowly drifted down to land on the nearby branches, their eyes now soft, almost as if they were assessing the little bobcat. The forest once again seemed still and quiet, but this time it felt different. The danger had passed, but the cub was left with a sense of wonder and awe. The crows had protected it. They had come to its aid when it was on the brink of becoming a meal for the wolf. They had fought fiercely, showing a strength and unity the cub had never expected from such small creatures. The little bobcat's breathing slowed as it cautiously stepped out from its hiding place, its eyes scanning the trees, still on edge. But now, instead of the fear that had gripped it moments ago, there was something new, something warm and comforting. The crows, though strange and ominous, had become its protectors in a way the cub could not yet fully understand. For the first time, the forest didn't feel like an empty and dangerous place. It felt like a place where the cub had found allies, even in the most unexpected forms. The cub, still trembling from the harrowing encounter, slowly emerged from its hiding place, its fur matted with the damp earth and leaves. The crows had retreated to the highest branches, their dark forms now quiet, perched in a loose circle above the young bobcat. The soft rustle of feathers was the only sound in the stillness of the forest, and for a long moment the cub stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. The air felt different now, lighter, but filled with an unspoken tension. The cub's eyes lifted to meet the crow's gaze. There was no malice in their watchful stares, no sense of triumph or victory. They simply observed, their black eyes gleaming with something that almost resembled curiosity, though the cub couldn't quite understand it. It had been under attack, and yet these crows, once only figures of dark mystery in the trees, had come to its aid. The young bobcat took a hesitant step forward, its instincts urging caution, but there was a strange sense of safety now in the presence of the birds. The forest around them seemed to breathe again, the air softening, the pressure lifting, but it was no longer the same peaceful place it had been before. The cub felt changed. It had learned something vital in that brief moment of danger. The world was far more complicated than it had ever known, and survival didn't just depend on speed or stealth. It depended on allies, too, and sometimes those allies came in the most unexpected forms. The crows did not move, but they watched as the cub took another careful step. Slowly they began to move as well, gliding silently from one branch to the next, maintaining their watchful positions as if guarding the cub. It was strange how protective they seemed, their movements no longer predatory but deliberate, like guardians of the forest. The young bobcat, for the first time, felt a shift in the air, not the heavy oppressive feeling of danger, but the slight warmth of something comforting. It wasn't entirely safe yet, the cub knew, but for now, it was no longer alone. As it began to move deeper into the forest, the crows followed. They didn't swoop down in frantic dives this time. Instead, they kept a steady, watchful distance, their black wings beating softly in the air as they flew from tree to tree, never straying too far. The cub felt their eyes on it, a constant presence in the shadows above. At first it had felt like an invasion, like a threat. But now, as the forest seemed to close around them, the cub realized the crows weren't chasing. It was more like they were guiding. The soft flapping of their wings became a rhythmic sound, one that matched the cub's steady, measured steps. With each stride, the cub grew a little more confident. The familiar rustling of the forest floor under its paws, the gentle sway of the trees in the wind, it all felt a bit less threatening now. The cub no longer felt like prey in an unfamiliar world. The crows, though silent, offered a reassurance. They had shown that the wild was full of dangers, yes, but it was also full of unexpected allies. Perhaps the forest, in all its complexity, had its own kind of balance, one that the cub had yet to fully understand, but one that seemed to be revealed in moments like this. The cub reached a clearing where the sun streamed down through the branches, casting a patchwork of light on the forest floor. The crows settled on nearby branches, their dark forms like sentinels, keeping a watchful eye on the cub as it ventured further into the open space. The little bobcat stopped for a moment, pausing to catch its breath. It was still young, still learning, but for the first time in its life, it felt like it had found its place in this vast, mysterious world. It wasn't just the strength of its own instincts that would carry it through the forest. It would need to rely on more than just speed, strength, and cunning. The cub had learned that the forest was full of strange allies, ones that didn't always look like friends at first. And as it looked up at the crows, now perched quietly above, the cub understood something important. Sometimes survival wasn't about running away from danger, but about understanding who you could trust and finding strength in unexpected places. The forest, as wild and unpredictable as it was, had shown the cub that protection could come from the most unlikely of sources. And with that newfound understanding, the cub padded forward once more, its paws light on the earth, its heart a little braver, and crows still keeping watch, as if guiding it on its journey into the heart of the forest.